Now, what, Mr. Ambassador, motivated you to join the military service when you were rather young? In fact, is it true that you were a bit too young to really join the military?
I was 14. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to defend my country, and I had the opportunity to do both. But it was during the First War. Most of my time was spent on the Atlantic and in Western Europe in the Navy. It wasn't until I joined the Marines after the war in 1920, I believe, that I was sent to the Philippines and China and developed an interest in this part of the world, which has been dominant in my thinking ever since that time. I've seen many changes occur during that period. The colonies have become nations. Nations have achieved equality with the rest of the world. I think the moves have been in the right direction. Some sad consequences and difficulties in between, but onward and upward, and the whole of East Asia and Southeast Asia is beginning to achieve a feeling of nationhood, a feeling of nationality, and I think that it's a much better system than the old system, which was used for exploitation to a large extent, a draining of resources, and out of it has come mutual respect and trust, and we're all better off for it.
What were your first impressions of Nagasaki? Was it where your ship taking on coal?
That's right, in 1922. And it was only a 3-day stop, but in those days ships were coaled, and the bearers of the coal were women, and they just formed a long line going around in circles, and they carried the coal in baskets on their heads or their shoulders and dumped it into the hold. It was interesting, but sort of degrading experience that women should have been doing that work, but it was the custom so in the country, so you lived with it. The beauty of Nagasaki as a city and the surrounding country impressed me very much, but my memories are indistinct. It was so long ago. It was a three-day stop from Taku in China to San Francisco, and it took a total of 31 days to make the trans-Pacific voyage.
And of course you have revisited Nagasaki since.
Oh yes, and I find it just as beautiful as ever, the people just as kind and courteous, and the place just as endearing as ever.
Were they amused to hear about your first visit?
Yes, and I told them that that my ship, the ship I was on, a troop ship, stopped at Nagasaki in August of 1922, and that the name of the troop ship was General Logan. I met them the next day. They had checked their records, and they said there was a ship, a troop ship, which stopped at Nagasaki, but it was in September, and its name was something else, General something else. So it was the only troop ship that stopped at Nagasaki that year. They had the records, and so they brought me up to date on what I had been telling them.
Very interesting. Actually, you first joined the Navy, but then didn't you, for a short while, join the Army before
volunteering? Yes, I was in the Army for a year, and that was when they had 1 year enlistments, and then I went in the Marines for 2 years.
I see. But Marines are all volunteers?
Yes, all of them were all volunteers at that. Well, no, I guess there was a draft during the war, but after the war, they went back to a volunteer status, and the Army and the Marines were made up of that type of individual exclusively.
Now, it was back in 1940 when you first sought public office. What was your motivation? Was it Mrs. Mansfield's prompting, so to speak?
To a large extent, yes, and being of Irish descent, I was interested in politics, as all Irishmen are, in some degree or other. But we ran that year. I didn't make it. I finished third in a field of 3, but the foundations had been laid. So when we ran in 1942, we achieved a tremendous amount of support from the student body at the University of Montana, plus extraordinary support from Butte and Anaconda, and I was able to, we were able to make it.
You were second generation Irish.
First generation
First
Irish,
generation.
and the first in my family born in the United States. My father and mother were both Irish immigrants.
Is Mrs. Mansfield Irish also?
She's Irish too, but she goes back a good deal further than I do. Her folks came in by way of Canada, and I think it was around the middle of the last century.
President Reagan is Irish?
Yes, he's Irish. I think he's visited.
Yes.
The place where his folks came from, and so was John Kennedy Irish.
Yes. Have you visited Ireland?
Yes, several times.
Yes. I visited Dublin back in 1956. I've always been interested in things Irish literature. If I may tell you an interesting episode, once I was in a nice boutique in San Francisco, which sold Irish linen, Irish ties and things. I bought 3 or 4 ties made in Ireland, all in green. This proprietress thought it was amusing. She asked why I liked the things Irish. For the spur of the moment, I replied, must be a bit of Irish in me. She thought that was pretty amusing. What is the place or the role of the Irish Americans? You said you like Irish like politics.
Well, the Irish don't form the largest minority in our country. The Germans do, but then I think the English and then the Irish. But the Irish seem to have a desire to become involved in politics, and that's about the only reason I can think of.
Do you wear anything green on St. Patrick's Day?
If I have anything green to wear, yes. If I don't, no.